Good day. Here we are, section 5, fiber optics. I put it in the section B about reflection, but it has an overlap with section C, refraction. When we have things like glass and water, light that's inside the fiber, if it hits at too large an angle, it cannot refract out. It cannot escape out the sides of the fiber. And that fiber could be made of glass, it could be made of water. And so it gets reflected back in, and we end up with something called total internal reflection. And so essentially the light just keeps rebounding off the sides and comes out the end of the tube. And that's why you're able to pour light out of that jar filled with water. And we had that crazy coiled tube where the light would go in one end of the tube and come out the other. Here are examples of uses. We have telephone lines for many years have used fiber optics. We now have optic TV. So instead of passing electrical signals through copper wire, the signal gets transformed into light and goes through these optical tubes. And it makes for a much cleaner signal. They've been used for many years in the medical field. You can take a very narrow tube, maybe the thickness, probably a little bit thicker than a hair, and you can pass it down someone's esophagus, and you can actually look at things that are in the stomach and whatnot. Also used by plumbers. Rather than having to take all the pipes apart, you can run the tube in and see where the clog is. So all kinds of uses for fiber optics. So we have what we call the visible spectrum. When we get white light from the sun, it doesn't appear to have a color. But it turns out it's a blend of all the colors of the spectrum. And the way to remember is Roy G. Biv, and that the letters represent the first letters of each color. So red is the R, orange is the O, etc., until we get down to the V for the violet. And yes, you have to know it. The violet is more energetic at that end. So ultraviolet light has lots of energy. In the infrared, below red, that's the lower end of the spectrum, and you can read that more carefully. You created a rainbow in the activity with the prism, and you should have separated into all these colors, and I've tried to make these colors look the right color. And if you see a rainbow in nature, that means the raindrops essentially are acting like prisms, and the light will bend at different rates. We find the red bends less than the violet, and that's how it can separate light into the colors of the rainbow. And in fact, we can combine the colors to get back to white light. The other thing to keep in mind is, let's say you had a red binder. Well, what that means, it's absorbing all the other colors of the rainbow, but it's reflecting red. So it would be absorbing orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, and it would reflect red. If you saw green, same kind of thing. It would be reflecting the green color and absorbing the others. And so that's the point here. And a friendly reminder, white objects are good at reflecting light, and so one way of staying cooler. And black objects are good at absorbing, and they tend to get warmer. Light sources are the last thing to talk about. If something makes its own light, we call it luminous. There are examples of luminous things like a star and a campfire. And things that don't make their own light are called non-luminous. In this case, the moon. We put in a hamburger. So those words you have to know about. And then we have broad sources and point sources. The sun is large enough that here from Earth, it's a broad source. Most other stars would be point sources. They're so far away, they get very tiny. Headlights of a car can be a broad source when they're nearby, and a point source when they're farther away, and that's the last thing it says. Make sure your notes are all filled in and study them. Make a glossary.